قتلة متسلسلين هربوا من الشرطة وما زالوا أحياء. مشاهدة ممتعة يا عيال. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قتل الآلة البيع أما لايك اشتراك يا لايك اشتراك. أو في اليابان هذا. أوه عرفت القصة ذي.
When he approached the vending machine, however, he noticed something surprising.
هذا غيرت اليابان بشكل مو طبيعي.
Energy drink was already in the pickup tray. Thinking he'd lucked down on a free drink, the truck driver wasted no time chugging it down. What he
بلاش
didn't know was that
معلومك.
this would be the last drink he would
معلومك
ever
ومقفل
taste.
كمان.
Instead of the refreshing feeling he was looking for, he felt something horribly wrong with his body. A bitter, burning sensation quickly spread throughout his throat, followed by an intense wave of nausea. It wasn't long before he was lying on the road in excruciating pain. He was rushed to a nearby hospital where doctors discovered a lethal amount of paraquat dichloride in his system. Paraquat is an herbicide that was quite common in Japan at the time. More importantly, it's also highly toxic to humans. When ingested, it can lead to severe nausea, throat inflammation, internal chemical burns, and eventually death. This is also why it's been banned completely from over 70 countries to date. Unfortunately, despite knowing the reason for his illness, there was nothing the doctors
إيش البلاهة كيف هذا المبيد موجود داخل عصير مقفل.
Let alone back then. So, after hanging on to his life for a month, the truck driver passed away on the 30th of May 1985. At first, investigators assumed that given the nature of his work, he might have accidentally encountered the toxic substance while on duty. However, after reviewing his haul records, they found no trace of this herbicide or anything remotely linked to it. This left them with only one conclusion. The chemical was mixed into the drink he consumed just moments before collapsing in agony. But with no leads or concrete evidence, they couldn't determine whether it was a murder or self-inflicted act, resulting in the case getting shelved for the time being. Now, while this might sound absurd today, you have to understand that paraquat was readily available in the country at the time. You didn't need any prescription or identification to purchase the chemical, leading to over 1,400 people using it as the poison of their choice in 1984 alone. In other words, the possibility of it being self-inflicted was just as high. However, just as the investigators were about to give up on this case completely, they received tragic news. Another person had fallen victim to the same on the 5th of September. Then another 6 days later, and one more after that. By this point, it was clear that someone was poisoning vending machine drinks across Japan. This was the work of a deranged serial killer. Unfortunately, this supposed killer was also extremely thorough. He didn't leave any fingerprint or DNA evidence on the drinks he tampered with, and
عشان تعرفوا بس حاجة معينة في قصة اللعبة، قصة القاتل ذا. زمان كان في عندهم زي العرض. شفت العصيرات هذه مثلا اليابانية، كان في عصير واحد منهم يقول لك يمديك تشتري 2 بسعر واحد، فلما تدفع في الآلة هذه 2 يطلع لك 1. فكان شيء طبيعي إذا الواحد ما يبغى يشرب يحط الثاني فوق، يحط الثاني فوق إنه بلاش، يعني اللي يبغى يشرب ويشرب. عرفتوا؟ فهذا سائق الشاحنة ماشي بيشتري عصير، لقى فيه عصير مجاني نفس الفكرة اللي أنا قلت لكم إياه. أكيد في واحد حطه ما يبغاه، مقفل يعني ما كان مفتوح، ما كان مشروب، مقفل بالكامل. شربوا وهذا اللي صار. ونفس الشيء في منطقة ثانية، ونفس الشيء في منطقة ثانية، كلها بعيدة وقريبة من بعض. فهذا الشيء خلى كاميرات ومقفل هذا بإحكام قروشة.
As for why his victims willingly drank the unknowingly poisoned
ايه شوف هذا العرض.
That had to do with the buy one get one free promotion Oranaminsi was running around the time to entice younger consumers. However, since some people only wanted the one drink, they often left the second drink for the vending machine as a gift for the next person. This was common enough that people didn't find the laced drinks suspicious and drank them without a second thought. Sadly, this method was terribly effective. By the end of the year, this mysterious vending machine killer had claimed the lives of 12 victims.
قبل 40 سنة وإلى الآن حي. مو يمكن مات بس يعني إلى الآن حي.
Earlier, this killer was a master of hiding his tracks.
35 جريمة.
He operated all across western and central Japan, as well as Tokyo, making it near impossible for investigators to pinpoint his location. The lack of evidence also made it difficult to figure out his motive. Some speculated that he was doing all this to extort money from Atsuka Pharmaceuticals. This is because in 1984, a group called the Mystery Men with 21 Faces threatened to poison food products unless the companies paid them money.
كل شوية اليابان زمان كانت مشاكل إلى الآن والله.
Something similar. However, this theory didn't last very long because Otsuka Pharmaceutical didn't receive any demands or extortion letters from the perpetrator. Additionally,
بس
the
كذا
killer also
مسكت
began
معاه.
using other drinks, like the drink Real Gold and even Coca-Cola. Hiroaki Iwao, a Tokyo professor of criminal sociology, proposed a more disturbing theory regarding the killer's motives.
ايش
He
هي؟
stated, "It is not uncommon for Japanese who live under tremendous pressure, both on the job and in
يب
overcrowded
يعصبوا
communities, to
ويبغوا
let out their
يهادوا
frustrations
العالم.
by hurting someone else.
يب
The person responsible may even wait around to see who buys the poisoned drink. He or she may find this is a kind of exhilarating release from the tensions of life in Japan." But even if this was the truth, it still didn't bring investigators any closer to catching the suspect. Left with no other options, the authorities turned to the public and launched a nationwide campaign on the 27th of September. They placed signs and distributed leaflets telling people to avoid suspicious free drinks and to properly inspect the cap seals on their beverages before consumption. They also instructed vending machine owners to investigate their stock for any anomalies and told chemical shops to
عارف
monitor their customers
غير
closely.
نظام البيع
It's
في
unclear
اليابان.
how effective this campaign was, as the number of victims kept increasing even after its launch. But then something unexpected happened. On the 17th of November, the murder spree stopped completely after the death of a 17-year-old girl. She was the only female to have died from
بالغلط واحدة ماتت او
poison.
واحدة، يعني كان دائما اعتقد يأيم على رجال كبار، بس فجأة بنت ماتت.
It's possible that the person who committed these atrocities had a moral code against harming women.
يب
Though that's nothing more than a baseless speculation. Due to the complete lack of evidence, the vending machine killer was never identified,
أعوذ بالله.
cementing this case as one of the most chilling, unsolved mysteries in Japanese history.
أعوذ بالله. والله شيء يخوف.
Little Rock serial stabber. On April 11, 2021, the
طا-
Little Rock Police
طبعا
Department received a
منطقة
distress call
Little
from
Rock.
South Pulaski Street regarding a potential homicide. When they arrived at the scene, they found a middle-aged woman lying on the street with stab wounds all over her body.
أعوذ بالله.
This woman turned out to be 41-year-old Deborah Walker. She was homeless at the time and was living on the streets when this incident happened. She was quickly taken to the hospital where medical staff discovered that she had been stabbed at least 15 times. Despite lying on the street, bleeding for what may have been hours, she miraculously survived and managed to regain consciousness the same day. Investigators also visited her in the hospital to gather any information she could provide about her attacker. Unfortunately, she was attacked somewhere between 1 and 4 a.m. It was still dark outside, and all that she saw was that her attacker was a tall African-American male with a slender build. Now, in most other similar cases, such limited information would hardly be enough to generate any leads. But in this instance, the description Deborah provided left the investigators in disbelief. That's because her attacker's profile closely matched the perpetrator of another incident that took place about 8 months earlier in the surrounding area.
قبل 8 شهور برضو نفس الشيء.
64-year-old Larry Eugene McChristian.
Homeless.
He was living in Little Rock with his daughter Sarah, who was on probation at the time.
لا والله.
On the 20th of August 2020, he had a medical emergency and was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. He was discharged from the hospital the next morning. However, when the hospital staff tried to contact Sarah so she could pick him up, she wasn't answering her phone. So they gave Larry the information about a nearby homeless shelter and a bus token to get there. Later that day, Sarah came to the hospital looking for her father, only to learn that he'd been discharged hours ago. She then reached out to the homeless facility Larry was told about, but they didn't know anything about his whereabouts either.
What?
The only option she had was to file a missing persons report and wait for the police to find Larry. 2 days later, on the 24th of August, Sarah received the call she was waiting for. Tragically, it wasn't the news she had hoped for. According to the official report, the Little Rock Police Department found Larry's body on South Gaines Street at around 2 a.m.
لا.
They identified him by the hospital discharge papers he had on him. More importantly, he had multiple stab wounds on his body and was unfortunately already dead by the time the police arrived.
أعوذ بالله.
His death was declared a homicide, and the investigators began looking for clues
ما
almost
في.
immediately. This proved quite impossible at first, since there were no witnesses and there wasn't anything that could be used as evidence.
ليه طلعوه كذا بدري؟ كان استنته أحد من أهله
However, after
ياخذوه.
inspecting the surrounding houses, they had a major breakthrough. The CCTV camera outside a nearby house had captured the suspect walking down the street when suddenly he spots Larry and begins walking towards him. After committing the crime,
أعوذ
he
بالله.
tries
شو
leaving the
شافه
area,
ورجع له.
only to stop, go back, and stab Larry one last time before fleeing. As mentioned earlier, this man matched the profile Deborah gave to the police, leading investigators to believe she was attacked by the same person. While looking into older cases, they also connected the same killer to another murder that happened in the area on September 23, 2020. The victim of this incident was 62-year-old Jeff Welch, another homeless man who was living in an
يا
abandoned
ساتر ما في الا
On
هوملس.
the morning of that day, Jeff's friend found him on the porch of his house with a stab wound on his neck. By this point, the investigators knew they were dealing with a deranged serial killer. However, just as they uncovered the connection between the three attacks, another tragedy unfolded. On
كمان
April 12, 2023, a day after the attack on Deborah Walker, another one of his victims was found on the Wright Avenue.
اعوذ بالله.
The only thing in common with these four attacks was that they all involved homeless individuals, and they all happened between 1 and 4 a.m. There seemed to be no clear pattern on how the perpetrator selected his targets. This left the Little Rock community terrified to leave their homes, fearing they might become the next victim of the serial killer on the loose. After realizing the potential danger of this situation, LRPD began spreading awareness about the man who is now being referred to as the Little Rock Slasher. They also turned to the public to ask for any information they could provide on the matter, and even announced a $20,000
والله
reward.
كثير 70,000
We
ريال.
also need your help. If you have seen anything
شيء مرعب يا
suspicious
عم
or
ما
have
تطلع من
surveillance
الليل.
cameras on your homes or businesses in this area, please contact us at 501.
Unfortunately, despite having CCTV footage of the suspect,
ما قدروا
the
يمسكوه.
Little Rock
ما في لا
Slasher was
بصمات
never
ولا
caught.
شيء.
The case remains a mystery to this day. Or at least that's what the official reports say. While researching this case, I came across an Arkansas-based blog called the Snarky Media Report. The authors of this blog did their own investigation into the slasher
حلو
case,
ذولا ناس
and what
ناس
they
عاديين
found
مهووسة
was
بالجرايم.
shocking to say the
بدأ
least.
يحللوا.
Put simply, they claim to have found the true identity of the killer after talking to multiple locals and Deborah, who, according to their blog, already knew the identity of her attacker.
أحا.
They also uncovered
كانت
many
عرفت إنه مين
details
هي.
about this supposed killer, including his criminal record, which reveals that he has already served 2 prison terms in Arkansas for felony convictions of domestic violence. Also, his history with drug abuse and how it made him very agitated and violent. The authors of this blog also claim to have contacted the alleged killer's previous landlord, who gave them this image of the perpetrator.
أعوذ والله نفس
Which begs the
الشكل.
question, if they know so much about the slasher, including his legal name, why didn't they give this info to the police? That's where the case goes from creepy to bizarre,
ليه؟
since, according to them, they've already given everything they had to the relevant authorities. Despite this, the Little Rock police didn't make any
ليه؟
progression in catching the serial killer. Snarky Media also published a video of the Little Rock mayor and police chief refusing to answer questions about the case. This seems to hint at something incredibly shady going
يمكن
on
يعرفوا
behind the
اللي صار.
scenes. That said, there's no way for me to confirm if the authors of the Snarky Media blog are telling the truth. For all we know, their whole investigation is made up, and this is just some random guy who has nothing to do with the 4 attacks, and it's all a ploy to make the Little Rock Police Department look bad.
ما
Most
تدري
of the
والله.
information they've gathered seems to check out with what's released publicly by the authorities. The only discrepancy in their investigation is the age of the suspect. Officials believe the slasher to be young, possibly in his 20s, but the authors of this blog
أوكي.
state that the person they
يمكن
found
40
was
سنة.
46 years
هذا
old.
الفرق بين
Unfortunately, this is what
جهدهم
leads
وجهد
it.
الشرطة.
Whether Snarky Media is telling the truth or not remains uncertain. What is certain, however, is that the case remains unsolved to this day. The Little Rock Slasher is likely still out there and can continue his murder spree at
أي
any
لحظة.
moment.
شيء مرعب والله.
On February 17, 1997, 21-year-old Patrick McNeil went out with his friends.
حلو.
He spent the evening out drinking with his friends in the Dapper Dog Bar in Manhattan.
أوكي.
During this
في
time,
نيويورك
he likely
يعني.
drank more than he could handle, resulting in him throwing up in the bar's bathroom before leaving in a highly unstable and disoriented state.
نسأل الله السلامة.
Patrick was then seen turning left onto 90th Street, heading in the direction of the East River. This was the last time anyone would see Patrick alive. Following this night out, Patrick vanished into thin air. Despite extensive efforts, authorities found no leads or clues to his whereabouts. That is until April 7, 1997, when Patrick's lifeless body was found in the East River 50 days after his disappearance.
50 يوم.
Duty Sergeant of the NYPD's Special Investigation Division, Kevin Gannon, was called to the scene to assist with the body's recovery and examination. Kevin had been a seasoned detective for years, and by this point, there was little that could surprise him. However, the circumstances surrounding Patrick's death disturbed him to his core.
ليه؟
The more he looked into it, the more strange the situation became. For instance, Kevin noted that Patrick's body wasn't decomposed enough to have been floating in the river for a week, let alone the past 50 days. He also found burn marks on Patrick's
لا
body,
تعذب.
hinting at the possibility of him being restrained prior to his death. Kevin knew that something wasn't right. Unfortunately, due to the complete lack of evidence pointing to the
عذب بعدين رموه في
Patrick's death was
هذا.
ruled as an accident. Kevin kept thinking
كيف
over the
حادث؟
feeling for the next year.
كيف
but he stumbled
حادث؟
across a case that reinforced his suspicions even further. On February 13, 1998, another body was found in the same stretch of water. This
حلو
body
بعدها
was later
بسنة.
identified as 22-year-old Lawrence R. Andrews, who had gone missing on New Year's Eve after celebrating the event with his friends in Times Square. After getting on the case, it didn't take long for Kevin to notice eerie
نسأل الله
similarities between the
السلامة.
two cases,
نفس
as both
الشيئين.
bodies were found within yards of each other. Both of them were also young Caucasian males and were on track to have successful careers. They both disappeared in one of the most crowded cities in the world without any trace as well. Most importantly, Kevin also found similar oddities in both cases.
ليه أشياء
decomposed than they should have
أوكي
been,
في أشياء
and there were burn
مشابهة.
marks indicating possible restraints before their death. Lawrence's case prompted Kevin to look
عذبوا
for other
كلهم يا
similar
عمي.
cases across the U.S. He enlisted the help of fellow detective Anthony Duarte and a criminal justice professor, Dr. Lee Gilbertson. Together, they began investigating these cases, and soon a chilling pattern began to emerge.
أعوذ بالله.
In total, they found 45 different instances of young men dying under shockingly similar circumstances
45
to
شخص.
Patrick and Lawrence. Most of them went out for a night of drinking, became more intoxicated than usual, disappeared shortly after, and were later found dead in some body of water. Almost all of
كلهم
them were also
شباب.
Caucasian and on track
أعوذ
to have a
بالله.
high-paying career like engineering after college. Most disturbingly, however, they also found graffiti of smiley faces in the
لا.
bodies of at least a dozen different victims.
لا.
This led to the three investigators creating the smiley face murder theory.
يا واد يا
According to this
الرعب.
theory, these 45 and possibly many other deaths from the 1990s to 2010s weren't accidents in the slightest. Instead, they were murders committed by a single deranged person
نسأل الله
or an
السلامة.
organized group of serial killers. This is the only logical explanation they could find to justify the many oddities and similarities in these incidents. That said, while this theory makes complete sense to some people, others aren't convinced one
ليه
bit.
ليه مو
Criminal
مقتنعين؟
profiler Pat Brown, for instance, called this
أنا
theory
ما مقتنع بشعرك
ludicrous.
صراحة.
She believes that the idea of connecting smiley faces, one of the most common graffiti symbols, with murders is just absurd, stating, "It's not an unusual symbol.
إيه بس
If you
موجود
look
في
in
كل
any
في كل
area
جريمة
5 miles
مستحيل.
square, I bet you could find a smiley face." The FBI also completely denied this theory in a statement, reading, "The FBI has reviewed the information about the
حلو إيش قال
victims
ال
provided
FBI؟
by two retired police detectives who have dubbed these incidents the smiley face murders and interviewed an individual who provided information to the detectives. To date, we have not developed any evidence to support links between these tragic deaths or any evidence substantiating the theory that these deaths are the work of a serial killer or killers. The vast majority of these instances appear to be alcohol-related drownings.
حلو.
However,
خلوها
despite these
كمان
setbacks,
حادث.
the three men have stuck with their theory. They're still working on finding evidence to back their
خلاص
observations.
راحت.
That said, if their hunch is correct, it
خلاص
would mean
كم
one of the
عدت
most wicked
30
serial
سنة
killers
الموضوع
in
خلاص.
American history is still at large today.
ما حتلاقوه. 30 سنة يا رجل.
I-70 killer. Robin Fuldauer was a
قاتل
26-year-old Indiana University graduate
خط
who was
السريع.
working at an Indianapolis Payless shoe source store near I-70 in 1992.
دقيقة هذا
The
قرينا
8th of
عنه صح؟
April was supposed to be her day off. However, just as she was getting ready to relax at home,
شيء
the
مرعب.
employee who was supposed to man the
شيء
counter
مرعب
called
ذا.
in sick.
شيء
With
مرعب
no
ذا.
other options, her manager
قشعريرة.
called Robin and told her to cover the shift instead. Robin wasn't very happy about this emergency shift change, but she reluctantly agreed, arriving at the store at 10.
هذه واحدة كان عندها يوم اوف في محلها، كانت محل عادي، محل جزم الله يكرمكم. ففي يوم الاوف حقها دقت المديرة حقت الدوام، قالت له تعالي تكفين ساعديني ما ساعديني، قالت خلاص جاياتك.
And starting her shift as usual. Unfortunately, her day was about to get a whole lot worse. Everything seemed normal until 2 p.m. when the manager called the store for a routine check. To her surprise, Robin wasn't picking up the phone. She kept trying for a few minutes before giving up and calling the Speedway gas station neighboring the shoe store. One of the gas station employees, a friend of Robin's, went to the Payless store to see if she was doing okay. However, what she found inside left her confused. The store was in slight disarray and some of the shoes were missing from the shelves. The cash register was also open and there was no money in it.
حلو.
Most concerning of all, there were no signs of Robin anywhere. Her friend called out Robin's name, hoping she was just in the
لما
back and
خشت
would respond.
المستودع.
But when she didn't hear anything from Robin after minutes of standing in the store, she became worried and called the police at around 2:20 p.m. The cops arrived within minutes and began searching the store for clues on Robin's whereabouts. And it wasn't long before they made a devastating discovery. They found Robin lying in the store's back office, covered in blood. it was already too late. During questioning, an employee from the store across the street claimed to have seen a strange man loitering around the shoe store a couple hours earlier. According to this employee, the man sat on the curb for about a half hour, rifling through his bag and staring at the Payless store. They then saw the same man a few minutes later trying to hitch a ride back to Interstate 465, which was about a quarter mile from the store's location. Unfortunately, they were too far away to get a good look at the man's face. Given the money stolen from the register, and without any other leads, investigators filed this as nothing more than a robbery gone wrong.
حلو قصته
However, they
فاشلة
couldn't
لكن
find more wrong. Because just 3 days later, something similarly tragic happened to 23-year-old Patricia Smith and
برضه نفس الشيء.
32-year-old Patricia Makers. The two were working at a bridal shop in Wichita along I-70. The incident
برضه في نفس
happened a little
الشارع أو
past
في نفس
their
الطريق
usual
العام.
closing time as they were waiting for a customer who had a pickup. When they saw a man approaching the store, they assumed that it was the customer. However, this man drew a gun on the two after entering the store, took them to the back, and executed both with shots to the back of their heads. As the killer was leaving the store, he crossed paths with the actual customer the girls were waiting for. Without hesitation, he aimed his gun at the man and ordered him to head to the back of the store. But the customer defied his command and ran, narrowly escaping with his life. He later helped the police draw a sketch of the killer. Unfortunately, the sketch didn't provide much of a breakthrough. By this point, the authorities were certain they were dealing with a serial killer, but despite their efforts, the killer's spree continued. By May 7th, he had taken 3 more victims in small, traffic stores along
أعوذ بالله يحب المحلات الصغيرة.
investigators managed to compile a few more sketches, the I-70 killer stopped his quest and went into hiding. That is until 1993, when he claimed 3 more victims along I-35 in Texas.
Come on.
He tried to hide his identity by changing his weapon, but the investigators were quick to notice the similarities. One of his victims, Vicky Webb, also managed to miraculously survive after getting shot in the neck. If he were ever caught, Vicky's testimony would have been crucial in bringing him to justice. Though the I-70 killer was never found, and the case went cold for nearly 3 decades. However, then, in 2021, investigators released CCTV footage of a murder that happened in 2001. The suspect in this footage looks strikingly similar to the I-70
اوكي هذه جريمة صارت في المحل دي.
potentially giving authorities the lead they need to finally catch him. It's likely only a matter of time before he runs
أشر على سلاح.
But for now, he's still out there, evading police and leaving the case unresolved in the meantime.
أعوذ بالله ذولا كلهم قاتلين ما حد مسكهم. لايك واشتراك يا عيال.